fastest way to kill a masterpiece is to create a spin-off. Sounds ridiculous, right? Because a TV masterpiece already has everything Hollywood is chasing. Nobody wants to say goodbye, fans want it to keep going, networks want it to keep going. Sometimes even the actors themselves are not ready to leave the roles that turn them into legends. So why does that supposedly unbeatable formula end up turning into a disaster? Today we are going to look back at 8 spin-offs that seemed impossible to fail, and then ended up destroying their own magic. There is a spin-off of Friends that NBC did not even fully air. There is a series that fans begged to bring back only for those same fans to end up killing it off. And there is a female version spin-off that was seen as cheap compared to the original male-led show. Watch till the end, because maybe the name you love is sitting right in this list. And the real question is, can you face it? Number 8, Joey. Friends is a masterpiece. Joey is a disaster. And the hardest thing to believe is that the distance between those two extremes lasted only a few months. In May 2004, Friends ended after 10 seasons with more than 52.5 million Americans watching the finale. That was not just a sitcom finale. That was an old-school TV night, the kind where the next morning men still asked each other at work in diners out in the parking lot, "Did you watch Friends last night?" Then, only about 4 months later, NBC put Joey on the air. Hollywood really is not good at leaving a beautiful thing alone, especially when that thing had just printed money for 10 straight years. Not 4 years for nostalgia to ferment. Not a decent pause. Just 4 months. Monica's apartment had barely gone dark. Central Perk was still echoing in viewers' heads, and Joey Tribbiani had already been dragged to the airport for Los Angeles. On paper, this sounded reasonable. Joey was one of the most loved characters on Friends. Matt LeBlanc had the charm of the kind of sitcom guy American men back then found easy to like. Handsome, but not threatening, dumb, but not pathetic crazy about women, but still with a heart. Joey could walk into a room, say something very stupid, and somehow make everything feel lighter, but that was also the trap. Joey was never designed to stand alone. In Joey, he leaves New York to pursue his acting career in Hollywood. Drea de Matteo plays Gina, Joey's sister. Paolo Costanzo plays Michael, his smart nephew. Andrea Anders plays Alex, his neighbor and love interest. Jennifer Coolidge plays Bobby, Joey's agent. To be fair, this cast was not trash. Drea de Matteo was coming in hot from The Sopranos. Jennifer Coolidge could get a laugh just by raising an eyebrow. But they were being handed an almost impossible job replacing the feeling of 10 years of friendship. None of them was Chandler. None of them was Monica. No Ross, no Rachel, no Phoebe, no apartment across the hall. None of that rhythm where one person only had to open their mouth and the other 5 already knew how to catch the line. The first episode of Joey pulled about 18.6 million viewers. Sounds good, sure. If it had been a brand new sitcom, NBC probably would have opened champagne, but this was not a brand new sitcom. This was the still warm shadow of Friends. Season 2 dropped to about 7 million viewers, sometimes down to around 4.1 million. NBC moved it to Tuesday night, where American Idol was waiting like a ratings grinder. By May 2006, Joey was canceled, and then came the final hammer blow. The final 8 episodes of Season 2 were not aired by NBC in the U.S. at the time. Think about that for a second. This was not some unknown sitcom buried at midnight. This was the official spin-off of Friends. And yet, the network that had lived off Friends did not even bother airing all of it. The press can talk about ratings, scheduling, the shadow of Friends being too big, or the lack of the other 5 people. All of that is true. But if you ask me, Joey's biggest crime is not on the ratings chart. It is that the series took Joey Tribbiani, a character who seemed simple but actually had his own emotional rhythm, and shaved him down into an easy-to-recognize joke. And if Joey shows that a sitcom cannot survive on one friend separated from the group, then the next story hurts even more. A science fiction series fans beg to bring back, only to make those same fans regret it. Number 7. Galactica, 1980. Battlestar Galactica fans saved Battlestar Galactica from being killed off. Then Galactica 1980 appeared and made a lot of people wish they had not. The original Battlestar Galactica premiered in 1978, right when America was still drunk on science fiction after Star Wars. It had a giant battleship, Viper squadrons, Cylon survivors fleeing through the stars, and a mission that sounded very classic but still very masculine, finding a way home after your whole civilization had almost been wiped out. Then ABC canceled it after one season. Fans refused to accept it. They wrote letters, put on pressure, demanded that Battlestar Galactica be brought back. And the strange thing is they won. The network listened, but like many victories in TV history, the reward came with a very expensive price. In 1980 Galactica, 1980 went on the air. Only 10 episodes. The story takes place many years later when Galactica finally finds modern Earth. That sounds great at first. After all that searching, the fleet finally arrives. But then the problem shows up very quickly. This is no longer the Battlestar Galactica fans had begged for. Richard Hatch did not return as Apollo as a central character. Dirk Benedict, the cocky soul of Starbuck, was almost absent from the series, except for one special episode later. Instead, the show brought in Troy and Dylan, two new faces placed into a role that felt a lot like a replacement duo, and viewers knew the core had changed. You cannot just put two guys in colonial uniforms and replace Apollo and Starbuck. One man was morality and duty. The other was reckless charm. They were the masculine heartbeat of the original. When they disappeared, Galactica 1980 felt like a Viper with the outside shell still intact, but the engine removed. But the biggest mistake was the setting. Battlestar Galactica was a show that should have looked up at the sky. It lived on space battleships, strange planets, the feeling of being hunted by Cylons, and the loneliness of a fleet trying to survive. Galactica 1980 dragged the story down to Earth in 1980. Fans asked for a survival war between humanity and the Cylons. ABC gave them a science fiction series that smelled like an after-school lesson. The show was made more childlike, more friendly, lighter, with even an educational element. A notable part of the story revolved around colonial children on Earth. For viewers who loved the original because of battleship's pilots and an epic feeling that was a slip very hard to forgive. Even Commander Adama did not feel the same anymore. In the original, Adama was the man standing in the ashes of humanity and still keeping everyone moving forward. In Galactica, 1980, he often had to rely on Dr. Z, a child genius. I do not know about you guys, but I do not turn on Battlestar Galactica to watch the great commander of the fleet stand there waiting for a kid to explain the next step. The biggest irony is that the episode many fans remember kindly is The Return of Starbuck. Dirk Benedict came back. That episode had loneliness mythology being lost in space, exactly the Battlestar feeling more than almost the entire rest of the series. In other words, the best moment of Galactica 1980 was the moment it stopped trying to be Galactica 1980 and went back to being Battlestar Galactica. And if Galactica 1980 is the story of a franchise fans pulled out of the grave only for it to come back in the wrong shape, then the next entry is a different kind of pain. After one of the greatest goodbyes in TV history, the network still would not let the audience leave. Number 6. AfterMASH. MASH ended like a television state funeral. AfterMASH showed up a few months later and turned that farewell into an appendix nobody needed. On February 28, 1983, more than 105 million Americans sat in front of the TV to watch Goodbye Farewell and Amen. That was not just the final episode of a sitcom. It was a collective goodbye. An entire country watched the people at the 4077 Mobile Army Surgical Hospital leave one another carrying war, friendship, guilt, pain, and the jokes that had helped them survive. When a show ends like that, sometimes the smartest thing to do is stay quiet, leave the tent empty, let the helicopter sound fade away, let the audience remember. CBS did not do that. Only a few months later, AfterMASH went on the air. The idea was to follow Colonel Potter Maxwell Klinger and Father Mulcahy after the Korean War as they worked at the General Pershing Veterans Hospital in Missouri. On paper, that was not meaningless. How does a soldier come home? How do doctors, priests, people who lived among blood and mud keep living after the war is over? That is a real question. But not every real question automatically makes a good sitcom. MASH was great because it lived inside a paradox you cannot fake laughter right next to death. Hawkeye joked, because if he did not joke, he would break apart. Those doctors saved people in a world that kept throwing other people onto operating tables. War was always out there just beyond the tent cloth, right under the sound of helicopters. AfterMASH moved everything into the post-war world. And right there, the original's special rhythm of pain and laughter began to weaken. A veterans hospital is a serious setting, even one worth exploring. But it did not have the same immediate pressure, the same suffocating absurdity, the same feeling that every joke might be the last thing keeping a man from falling apart. Then there was the character problem. Potter, Klinger, and Mulcahy were all likable. I do not mean to insult them. Harry Morgan, Jamie Farr, and William Christopher were familiar faces, the kind of actors who could make old viewers feel warm just by showing up. But they were not Hawkeye, not BJ, not Hot Lips, not Charles, not Radar. In MASH, they were part of a big meal. CBS asked them to cook the whole dinner again. Ken Levine, who had written for MASH and AfterMASH, later mocked it very directly, taking the 3 weakest characters from MASH and putting them in a veterans hospital that was really the formula for a classic comedy. It sounds harsh, but he was not wrong at the core. A spin-off cannot just ask who from the cast is available. To be fair, AfterMASH did not die right away. The first season opened strong. Viewers came because they still loved MASH. The show even got renewed for season 2. But that was the pull of a farewell that had not cooled, yet not proof that AfterMASH had found its own soul. When CBS moved it to Tuesday night against the A-Team, everything fell very fast. Season 2 dropped near the bottom of the rankings, was cut short, and 1 episode did not even air. That was when reality knocked viewers might visit a few old faces again, but they did not want to live in the paler shadow of 4077. If you ask me, AfterMASH does not deserve to be hated because it cared about the aftermath of war. On the contrary, that idea is very MASH. The mistake was that CBS turned a perfect goodbye into a weaker later chapter where post-war wounds had to squeeze into a half-hour sitcom format. Number 5, The Brady Brides, The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch was once the family memory of a whole generation. The Brady Brides turned that memory into a marriage sitcom almost nobody asked for. And that is a very Hollywood kind of mistake, seeing viewers smile once then assuming they want to sign a lease. The funny thing is, The Brady Bunch was not a ratings monster during its original run from 1969 to 1974. It did not dominate America the way Friends did, but through reruns it slipped into American living rooms like an old family photo. Not sharp, not dark, not trying to seem smart. Just a clean house, a few kids arguing, Alice walking in at the right moment, and 30 minutes later everything was fine again. We men grow up, and only then understand sometimes a simple show like that sticks around longer than things that were once praised as important. Then, in 1981, NBC looked at that soft memory and did what networks often do. They asked, how many more episodes can we squeeze out of this smile? Everything began with the TV movie The Brady Girls Get Married. The original idea was not bad. Bring the whole Brady family back to watch Marcia and Jan prepare for a double wedding. For fans, that was something they might want, one reunion, a chance to reopen the family album. See who had grown up, who had changed, who still reminded you of those afternoons watching TV after school. The Brady Girls Get Married should have been the kind of reunion you drop by for a while, drink coffee, look at old familiar faces, then leave feeling good. But NBC locked the door, pulled out a chair, and said stay for 10 more episodes. So The Brady Brides was born. Now, instead of the whole Brady family, the focus was Marcia and Jan after marriage. Marcia married Wally Logan, a fun, relaxed, slightly messy toy salesman. Jan married Philip Covington III, an older science professor, serious, conservative, organized. The two married couples bought a house together and lived under one roof. The Brady Brides shrank that world down to the 2 oldest daughters and 2 husbands the audience had not grown up with. Carol and Alice appeared, a few other Bradys dropped by too, but the old heart was no longer in the center. The Brady name was still on the sign, but the spiritual house had been sold off. Viewers did not turn on Brady to watch 2 new husbands learn how to live together. They turned on Brady to return to the house where everyone had known each other since childhood. This is a mistake television makes all the time, confusing a nostalgic smile with a long-term commitment. A reunion can live on affection. A series needs an engine. It needs a reason for viewers to come back next week and the week after that. The Brady Brides had a wedding, had the Brady name, had 2 familiar faces. But after the wedding cake was cut, what remained was a fairly small, fairly safe marriage sitcom. and fairly far from what fans truly remembered. The result was neat, almost cold 10 episodes. That was it. A family that had lived for decades in American memory, but its bride version only made it 10 episodes before running out of road. Entertainment Weekly later called it a 10-episode misfire, and even ranked it as the #1 worst spin-off on their list. And if the Brady Brides shows that a family reunion does not automatically become a sitcom, then the next death is even faster, cleaner, and almost crueler, a supporting character pulled out of the Jeffersons, then forced to come back after only 4 episodes. Number 4, Checking In. The Jeffersons. Checking In is a spin-off that died so fast that the Jeffersons had to explain it by literally burning down the hotel. That sounds like a sitcom joke, but it is pretty much the truth. In April 1981, CBS put Checking In on air. The idea was to take Florence Johnston, the sharp-tongued maid from the Jefferson household, out of her familiar apartment and give her a new job at the St. Frederick Hotel in New York. She was no longer just a maid. She became an executive housekeeper. On paper, it sounds like a nice step up for the character. The problem is the audience did not come along. Checking In only lasted 4 episodes. Low ratings. The show got canceled very quickly. After that, Marla Gibbs returned to the Jeffersons as Florence, and in the story, the reason was simple. The St. Frederick Hotel burned down. This is American television in the early 1980s in its most compact form. Try a spin-off fail, burn down the new setting, then send the character back home. But that does not mean Florence was a weak character. Quite the opposite. Florence is one of the sharpest comedic weapons in the Jeffersons. Marla Gibbs received 5 Emmy nominations for the role, and if you have ever watched her go back and forth with George Jefferson, you immediately understand why. Florence did not need to overdo anything. She did not need to shout, run around the room, or fight for attention. She just stood there, looked at George with that calm expression, and delivered a line as dry as a desert. The louder George got, the calmer Florence became. The more he tried to act like the boss, the more she made him look like he was losing control of his own apartment. That is the magic of this character, but that magic needed the right stage. In The Jeffersons, Florence worked best when she was opposite George and Louise. George was the loud, confident man who got rich and always wanted to prove he was in charge. Louise was warmth and common sense. Florence was the employee, but she never acted like she was beneath anyone in the room. That clash created the comedy. Checking In pulled her out of that setup and placed her in a hotel with a whole new cast. A manager assistant, a hotel detective, repairman, bellboy. It is not that a hotel cannot work as a sitcom setting. Many sitcoms do just fine in hotels. But the hotel in Checking In did not have George Jefferson. And for Florence, that was a big problem. A beloved supporting character does not automatically become a strong lead. Sometimes they work because of dosage. Florence could walk into a room, shut George down with one line, then walk out. That is a quick, clean punch. But when you make her carry half an hour every week, the character needs more than sharp comebacks. She needs a world strong enough to push back against her. Checking In did not build that world. Checking In ended after 4 episodes, but Florence lived on in The Jeffersons, and maybe that was the right ending. Not every supporting character needs a promotion to lead role. Some people just need to walk into the right room, say the right line, and make the whole country laugh before they walk out. Number 3, The Golden Palace. The Golden Girls. You can keep Rose, Blanche, and Sophia, but without Dorothy, The Golden Girls is not the same show anymore. The Golden Palace aired from 1992 to 1993, lasting only 1 season with 24 episodes. It continues after The Golden Girls ended. Dorothy gets married and leaves the group. Rose, Blanche, and Sophia sell their Miami home and buy a hotel called the Golden Palace. They think they are investing in something fancy, but the hotel is almost completely understaffed, so the 3 women end up running it themselves, along with Roland, played by Don Cheadle, and Chuy, played by Cheech Marin. On paper, this is not a bad idea. Betty White is still Betty White. Rue McClanahan still has that charming, confident Blanche energy. Estelle Getty can still land a line so sharp it makes the whole room go quiet for half a second before laughing. Don Cheadle and Cheech Marin are also solid additions. The problem is they are patching a hole that is not theirs to fix. That hole is called Dorothy. The Golden Girls is not just 4 older women living together, it is 4 different comedic energies placed in the right balance. Rose is naive. Blanche is confident, attention-seeking, and never apologizes for it. Sophia is the tiny mother figure who can cut through any room with one sentence, and Dorothy is the strongest reactor. She is the one who looks directly at everyone else's nonsense and says what the audience is thinking. Dorothy is not just funny lines, she gives the other characters their target. When Rose goes on too long, Dorothy stops her. When Blanche gets too full of herself, Dorothy punctures it. When Sophia jokes around, Dorothy is sharp enough to push back. Without Dorothy, Rose becomes too naive, Blanche becomes too much, and Sophia loses her best verbal sparring partner. That is why the Golden Palace feels like such a strange experiment. It did not lose the whole cast. It lost exactly the one person the show could not afford to lose. There is another issue: the hotel setting. The Golden Girls works best when the four women sit around a kitchen table, eat cheesecake, and talk about their lives. The Miami house creates a private feeling. It makes their friendship feel like family. The Golden Palace moves them into a hotel where stories revolve around guests, staff bills, and operational chaos. A hotel creates situations. A house creates emotions. That is a big difference. At first, audiences were curious. Of course they were. Rose, Blanche, and Sophia were back. People wanted to check it out, but curiosity does not sustain a series. Ratings dropped, and CBS did not renew it after one season. Susan Harris, the creator of The Golden Girls, later blamed the failure on the absence of B. Arthur. And she was probably right. If you ask me, The Golden Palace did not fail because of lack of talent. It failed because it confused three beloved characters with a complete sitcom structure. Those are two different things. The Golden Palace did not ruin The Golden Girls, but it did make one thing very clear. Keeping most of the familiar faces does not mean keeping the magic. In The Golden Girls, Dorothy was not optional. She controlled rhythm, set tone, and made everyone else work. Keeping three people does not mean keeping 3/4 of a soul. Sometimes losing one person is enough for the whole series to lose its balance. Number 2. The Colbys, Dynasty. The Colbys had money, Hollywood stars' mansions, and scandal. The only thing it did not have was a reason to exist. That is the strangest part of this spin-off. The Colbys was not a show abandoned to die. It was a spin-off of Dynasty, one of the biggest prime-time soap operas in America during the 1980s. In the 1984 to 1985 season, Dynasty was number 1 on Nielsen. It had wealth, power affairs, betrayal, expensive fashion, huge houses, and arguments acted out like every glass of champagne could become a weapon. ABC looked at that empire and thought, why not build another mansion next door? So The Colbys was created in 1985. In scale, it was not small. The cast included Charlton Heston, Barbara Stanwyck, Catherine Ross, Ricardo Montalban, Stephanie Beacham, along with John James and Emma Samms from Dynasty. This was not a group of unknown TV actors thrown into a cheap spin-off. This was old Hollywood prestige names that made viewers sit up and think, wait, Charlton Heston is doing a soap opera. The budget was big too. The goal was clear. Create a wealthy Colby branch that could stand beside the Carringtons, but the deeper you look, the clearer the problem becomes. The Colbys does not really have its own identity. It has rich families, corporations, broken marriages, affairs, power struggles, mansions, expensive clothes. In other words, it has everything Dynasty already had. The Los Angeles Times once called the Colbys not really a spin-off, but almost a clone. And that hit the truth. If audiences wanted Dynasty, they already had Dynasty. A more expensive, wider, better-dressed version does not automatically become a new reason to watch. At first, the Colbys still got attention. That is easy to understand. When you attach the Dynasty name and bring in Charlton Heston and Barbara Stanwyck, people will be curious. The show even won a People Choice Award for New Dramatic TV Program. But curiosity does not last. The first season ranked 35. In the second season, things got worse. It dropped to 64 and was canceled after 2 seasons. This was not an instant collapse, it was a slower kind of failure. Everything looked expensive, but the audience still left the party. Behind the scenes, there were problems too. Barbara Stanwyck left after the first season. But the most famous moment is not ratings, it is the UFO. In the season 2 finale, Fallon Carrington Colby gets lost in the Mojave Desert. Then a UFO appears. Fallon is apparently taken by aliens. Yes, we are still talking about a Dynasty spinoff. Not Battlestar Galactica, not The X-Files, Dynasty. The Colbys shows a simple lesson. A spin-off cannot just be a richer version of the original show. Without a distinct point of view, adding more money, more stars, more mansions, and more cliffhangers only makes it feel like a brand trying too hard to stay alive. And if the Colbys is a spin-off that drowned in luxury and a UFO, the final story is even sharper. A spin-off born from a 1960s spy craze failed so badly that some people believe it may have dragged the original show down with it. Number 1. The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. did not just fail, it is remembered as a spin-off that might have dragged the man from U.N.C.L.E. down with it. The original The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was very 1960s. Sharp suits, gadgets, secret organizations, international missions, and two cold spies named Napoleon Solo and Ilya Kuryakin. For male audiences at the time, it was easy to love. A world where men dressed well, spoke little, shot accurately, and always had a global threat to stop before commercial break. So the idea of a female-led spin-off was actually very strong. April Dancer, played by Stephanie Powers, could have become a major character. A smart, stylish, dangerous female agent in the same world as Solo and Kuryakin. On paper, it was gold. But on screen, the girl from U.N.C.L.E. never turned April into what the concept promised. Stephanie Powers had style and presence. The problem was the writing was not sharp enough to elevate her. A female spy in 1966 should have made audiences pay attention, but when the show makes her feel lighter, less dangerous, and trapped in overly silly plots, it weakens its biggest advantage. The series only lasted one season with 29 episodes. Early ratings were not terrible, but they dropped and NBC canceled it after the 1966 to 1967 season. Reviews at the time often said the show was too campy, too light, and too strange in its plotting. Entertainment Weekly even noted that some observers saw it as part of the reason the man from U.N.C.L.E. lost direction the following year. To be fair, you cannot blame the original show's cancellation entirely on this spin-off. The man from U.N.C.L.E. was already leaning more into camp, but that is exactly the issue. When a franchise needs to sharpen itself, the girl from U.N.C.L.E. made it feel softer instead, and that is why it sits at the bottom of the list. A bad spin-off can die alone. A more dangerous one can make the entire original franchise feel tired, outdated, and out of magic. We all understand why spin-offs exist. When a show is great, nobody wants it to disappear. Fans want more seasons. Networks want another hit. Actors want to keep living inside the roles that made them famous. But sometimes, loving a masterpiece also means letting it rest. So where do you stand? Do you want classic series to keep going even if it risks producing a Joey, an AfterMASH, or a Galactica 1980? Or do you think some endings should stay sealed so memories do not lose their color over time? I want to hear your thoughts. Which spin-offs do you think also deserve to be on this list? Did we miss any names? Or is there a spin-off that gets too much hate and actually deserves defending? Leave your comments below. And if you like strange behind-the-scenes stories from classic movies and TV, do not forget to subscribe to Weird Movie Secrets.